Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host. I'm a journalist based out in Reykjavik, Iceland, and I'm really happy that this week is episode number 50 of Gaming in the Wild. It's very satisfying to have been doing the show for a year and to see all those episodes stacking up with all those great games that have been covered, and I've got more great games to talk about today. I'm going to discuss a game that I've been playing for a couple of months on and off, and finally kind of had a little breakthrough with. It's Going Under, the first game by indie studio Aggro Crab. It's not my usual bread and butter, it's a roguelike dungeon crawler style game, but I got into it because of the great art style and I was just very curious to try it. It won me over before I'd even played it. It just looks so fun. It took a while to get into, and I've had some ups and downs with it, but I'm going to talk through that game today. And the second game that I'm going to talk about is actually a callback to episode number 1 of the show, where I covered Horizon Zero Dawn, which is still one of the top 5 games I think I've played in the last year or two. It's a real classic in my eyes, and a real beacon in the open world genre. You may have heard my thoughts about it before. I'm deeply enamoured with the whole creation of the central character, Aloy. She's just amazing with the voice acting, the motion capture, the scripting. Everything about her is very, very lifelike and human. And so it was very fun for me to go back into the game to play the Frozen Wilds, the only DLC that came out for that game. But there's a reason it's the only one, because it's like a whole other game. It's like a mini sequel more than a DLC. It's really spectacular. An icy world in the north of the Horizon Zero Dawn game world. And so I'll be talking about that too. And I'll finish up the show with some listener questions. I did a call out on the show's Discord and on Twitter at Gaming in the Wild, and I got some fun questions from regular listeners about what games I've bought the most times, what game is the most multiples that I have, about my life here in Iceland, and about which games helped me through the pandemic. So I'll be answering those questions at the end. But before we get into talking about Going Under and the Frozen Wilds, I just wanted to say a couple of thank yous. I wanted to say a thank you to you, whether you're a first-time listener or a regular listener. It's meant an awful lot to me to have a nice community around the show and to have positive feedback from people and to chat with people about what they're playing. It's half the fun of doing the podcast to me, is talking to the listeners and chatting with everyone. So thank you for being here. I'm a big podcast listener to myself. I'm listening to podcasts most of the day if I'm alone. And so I know that you get used to having certain kind of voices in your life. I listen to The Daily and I listen to This American Life. I listen to some football podcasts and I listen to some gaming podcasts. And I really appreciate the kind of company that they bring and hearing those different voices, those different personalities. And so I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be one of the voices that is in your life. It's really cool. I really love podcasting. It's a lot of fun. And I'd also like to say a special thank you to my patrons. I have a little Patreon for the show. It's a small scale thing, but it's just a couple of dollars a month to be a member. And I try and give back some extra content and sale recommendations. And we have a Discord server for the Patreon community. So I'd like to say an extra special thank you to all of my patrons. If you'd like to become a patron yourself, you can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. And the final thank you is to the gaming Twitter community. I kind of felt like I came to gaming Twitter really late and at a pretty low moment, actually. I was kind of having anxiety and burnout and playing Breath of the Wild. And I kind of really felt welcomed with open arms into this online community. Made a lot of friends there. Loved talking about games with everyone and meeting everyone out there. Gamer Twitter can be a bit of a toxic place sometimes, but it seems that good people group together and follow each other. So I really appreciate my Twitter community. And to celebrate this 50th episode, I'm actually doing a contest, a giveaway, for a digital download of Sea of Solitude for Switch. It's an indie game that came out recently about dealing with feelings of self-doubt, negative feelings. It's a very beautiful game with some quite difficult themes, but quite enjoyable gameplay. I ended up with a code for it that I haven't used. So if you would like to enter that contest to win Sea of Solitude, you can go to Gaming in the Wild on Twitter And all you have to do is tell me your favourite game that has been covered on the show so far and retweet the tweet and you'll be entered. I'll pin that tweet to the top of my Twitter today, so you can go and enter there. And with all of that out of the way, let's move on and talk about our first game of this episode, which is Going Under. So Going Under is a 2020 game by Aggro Crab, a new studio, and Aggro Crab are really fun. Like, I don't know if you follow them on social media, but they are really, really likable. Like, the presence that they have developed online and the voice that they've developed shows that they are really aware and really fun people. And Going Under has like a very intelligent, tongue-in-cheek, knowing, light-hearted air about the whole game. Now, it's not my usual cup of tea, as I said. It's a roguelike dungeon crawler, I guess you would call it. And it's a satirical one. So you play Jacqueline, I think her name is Jacqueline, and she's an intern at a company called Fizzle. Jacqueline is a really brightly coloured sprite with these big kind of sort of sausagey arms and legs and a huge blonde ponytail and bright pink skin. The art style of the game is just wonderful throughout, and she comes to Fizzle, a kind of crappy startup, I guess you would call it, with a kind of a dodgy CEO who's spending all of the money and just kind of obsessed with positivity rather than having any actual business sense. And then there's like a CFO who's like this guy called Marv, who's just kind of trying to get the most out of his employees by kind of passive aggressively bullying them. And then there's a couple of sort of downtrodden employees who are kind of coders or doing the finances and the books. And you come into the office of Fizzle, which is in a tower block that is owned by a company called Cubicle. And Cubicle is kind of a startup supporting, what do you call them, like an incubator. And Cubicle's a mega company, and Fizzle has given Fizzle some office space. But on your first day at Fizzle, as you talk to your fellow Fizzle workers and you kind of get the lay of the land with the company, and you meet the guy who designs Fizzle's soft drinks flavours, and the whole thing has a kind of a ramshackle startup feel to it, but you are not tasked with marketing, which is the intern that Jacqueline has signed up for. You are tasked with going down into the basement of the building, where there are several failed startups down there that are infested with monsters, and you've been tasked with going down there and clearing out the monsters. And so Jacqueline has like a really funny response to this. She's like, "Are you kidding me?" But then, because she's an intern on her first day, she kind of says, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." And so you can head down the slide to a company called Joblin. Like, all of the companies that you'll go to, the failed startups, are really funny. Joblin is the first one. I'm guessing that it's like a riff on the UK online job service Monster, but Joblin is a jobs agency startup. But it's an unusual one. It, like you'll soon learn, fleeces its employees who are tasked with going to do any job, and they don't know what the job is until they get there. So you hire yourself a Joblin, your Joblin will show up and do the job for you. But as the company has sunk down into the basement of the building, it's just infested with Joblins, with these goblin people that you have to defeat on your way down to find the rogue CEO of Joblin. So that's the story, basically. After you've done Joblin, you'll get different companies that you have to go and clear out of their monsters. One is called Styxcoin. It's a cryptocurrency infested by the dead, like I guess the River Styx being the reference point. If you've played Hades, you'll know all about the River Styx, or if you like mythology. And then there are other companies. There's one called Winky Dink, which is a really funny one that's based on a dating app. It's a pretty like sleazy office down there, and all of these different offices have monsters that are related to the company in some way, and they're all really funny. And you'll meet people down there and have conversations down there and learn more about the companies and their bad business practices and the way that they mistreat their employees that have, I guess, sunk down to the basement along with the companies. But this game isn't really about the story. It's a roguelike, so every time you go down to start a run, you'll come down the slide from the office area of Fizzle, and you'll land in a reception area with a couple of chairs and maybe a computer, a keyboard, and a few things lying around. And you can pick up pretty much anything. You can pick up a chair. It's a heavy weapon, so you'll move very slowly. You can pick up a keyboard and you can whack people with that for a few hits until it disintegrates. You can pick up practically anything. So you have to arm yourself, come into the first battle arena room with, a couple of enemies there, whack them with keyboards until the keyboard breaks, dodge roll away when they try to hit you, pick up something else like a mop or a foam finger or a vase or a bottle, whatever happens to be lying around. Lots of different weapons. You can carry 3 at a time and cycle through them. And then you have to whack all of the joblins until they are defeated. And then the room is completed, the exit will open. You pick up a little tip, if you're lucky, or a delivery from a drone with like a power-ups in it, and off you go into the next room. And because it's a roguelike dungeon crawler, it has all of the accoutrements of that genre. You'll get different perks and skills. You'll get money, and you can find like the cafeteria in each startup on each level, and power yourself up, buy yourself some more hearts. You can buy more effective weapons, and there are lots of different kind of skills systems that you can get into. You can get apps for your phone that act as kind of special moves. There's one that allows you to, it's like a kind of an Uber joke. So when you use that app, you'll get a car for 10 seconds or something, and you can drive around and run over all of the monsters. There's one that's like a peace app, and you do a yoga pose and then get one of your hearts back. So there are apps, there are skills, the different skills that you can pick up and perks. They allow you to maybe electrocute enemies or make enemies fall down more often when you hit them. They're kind of very, very, if you've played the roguelike genre, you'll know the kind of perks, skills, and special moves that you're going to get. In this game, they're all kind of based around startup culture and business culture, and so they're all kind of funny. And each startup has 3 levels. So at the end of each level, after defeating 5 or 6 different rooms, getting some skills, doing some shopping, you go down another slide to the next level. When you get to the bottom level, that's where the boss is. And then there are boss fights, 3 different boss fights, 1 for each startup. And that's the game. I actually found it quite difficult at first, I will admit. You only have 4 hearts, I think, at the beginning, and you'll lose half or 1 every time you're hit, so you can be hit between 4 and 8 times before you die. The items in the canteen are quite expensive, so you'll have to beat like probably 5 or 6 rooms before you can have money for a healing item. I would imagine that people that are familiar with the genre might get into the groove quite quickly with this game, seeing as it operates on familiar guidelines. It took me a while, as the only other roguelike that I've actually gotten into was Hades, more of which I think later. Going Under suffers by comparison to Hades quite a lot, and they came out at a very similar moment, I think maybe even the same week, and they are both modern, kind of flashy, fun, colourful takes on the roguelike dungeon crawler genre. But it's kind of unfortunate for Going Under that it came out at the same time as Hades, because you can pick almost any aspect of Going Under and see how Hades has refined it and improved it and balanced the gameplay to an incredibly high degree and taken the gameplay to a very smooth state, a frictionless state where you feel like you're kind of rapidly becoming more powerful, and that there is always a lot of motivation and you understand everything that's happening around you. And there are very defined strategies that you can use and large degrees of variation in every run of Hades. And Going Under really suffers by comparison. It seems a little simplistic in comparison to Hades, and a little retro, I guess. And that's a shame for Going Under, but I mean, as I was playing Going Under, I was constantly thinking of Hades. I was thinking about how the movement in that game is so fluid and fast, and you have like your dash, and You have various different builds of weapons. You can choose what power-ups you're going to fight for in the next room in Hades. You get like a kind of an A-B choice. So you can decide that you want to save money up, or you can decide to fight for godly boons that will increase your attacks or combine with other boons in really exciting ways. Or you can fight for a different currency that will affect your overall character. And Going Under doesn't have that. It doesn't have that choice at the end of a room. The movement feels a little stodgy by comparison. The roll is very short, the dodge roll, and there is no dash really. So it just feels like stodgy and slow compared to Hades. You never really feel like you've built up your character to a kind of a mighty crescendo in a run in Going Under. It's like you get a couple of apps, you get a couple of skills, and they kind of help you out a little, but all you're doing really is trying not to get hit and hitting things in Going Under. So there really is no wider scope to the gameplay in the same way as there is in Hades, where you invest in Zagreus and you build Zagreus up, and you kind of get all of these different currencies. I think there are 6 or 7 different currencies in Hades of mead that you can give to people, diamonds that you can use for something else, darkness and obols, and all of this different stuff going on, and all of these different weapons that you can try. And you can invest in your weapons and build them up too. Hades is just such a majestic construction of the roguelike formula that Going Under really feels like child's play by comparison. And it's a little mean to put them up against each other, but it's just unlucky timing, I suppose, that this game came out at the same time as Hades and suffers so much by comparison by having so much of the same gameplay and the same systems just executed to a lesser level. And that's not to say that Going Under is a bad game. I actually had quite a lot of fun with it. I found it hard at first, but once you get into the flow of it, or if you are a fan of the genre, I think you'll probably really enjoy it. It's kind of fun. It's very light-hearted. It's very colourful. The art style is good. The music is light and fun. The dialogue is snappy and amusing. The story is good. And the gameplay, such as it is great. Like you batter things over the head with whatever you can draw to hand. It's very chaotic and fun. Kind of frenetic at times. So if you're a fan of roguelikes, if you're a fan of dungeon crawling games, if you're a fan of this kind of arena melee, building your character up with skills and then getting clobbered and starting all over again, then Going Under is a fun game. It's a good little game. It's just a pale shadow of Hades. That's the problem that it has. I've put 55 hours into Hades. I've put 5 hours into Going Under, and I feel like it's already thinly stretched. Like it's kind of, there's a halfway point in the game where you have to kind of, well, spoilers, but not really. You have to kind of do all of the same dungeons again, basically. And I feel kind of done with it. I feel like I've seen what the game has to offer. So I'm kind of done with Going Under. I had a good time with it, but I'm not fully invested in it. I got 5 hours out of it, and that's probably enough for me. But as I say, if you're a fan of the genre, check it out. That's Going Under. So the next game I'm going to talk about today is Horizon Zero Dawn: The Frozen Wilds. And if you've listened to this show at all, you'll know what a big fan of Horizon Zero Dawn I am. I think it's one of the best open world games that I've played. And open world games and action adventure games, third person exploration and combat and story games that tie together all of that different appealing stuff into a big bundle. It's kind of my favourite genre, I have to say. Like alongside Breath of the Wild and alongside Red Dead Redemption and those kind of games, those kind of epic games, Horizon Zero Dawn stands shoulder to shoulder with them. And that's huge praise. I mean, I think that Breath of the Wild is probably my favourite game of all time. this podcast started off being named after Breath of the Wild, and I think Horizon Zero Dawn runs it very, very close in terms of the quality of the game, and supersedes it in some respects. For a game that was made in 2017, Horizon Zero Dawn still looks like it could come out today and be one of the most beautiful games that I have seen. The way that the nature is rendered in this game, the way that the weather systems change, the way that snow falls, and the way that small animals run out from the brush around you and cross the path in front of you. As you run through nature and see the swaying trees and the vegetation, it's just an enthralling experience to be in this game. And it's something that I noticed when I fired it up again to play the Frozen Wilds. I finished this game probably 9 months ago, and coming back to it to play the Frozen Wilds was just wonderful experience. Like, to open up Horizon Zero Dawn, to see Aloy on the screen, to see this world that I had enjoyed so much in my playthrough of the main game. It felt like slipping into like a really comfortable set of clothing, and that you've kind of forgotten how much you loved, if you know what I mean. It just I was very grateful to be back in this game. And the Frozen Wilds is a mammoth DLC. It really is. It's a whole new area of the game with the Banuk tribe. So as Aloy in the main game, you'll encounter different tribes such as the Karya and the Nora, which is what you are. And the Banuk is maybe the most interesting of the tribes of Horizon Zero Dawn. They are kind of a mystical tribe who worship the old technology that lies around this post-apocalyptic, overgrown and reborn world. So they tie wires into their skin like piercings, and they worship what they call the blue light, which I guess is, the lights of all of the machines in Horizon Zero Dawn, these animal machines that roam the wilderness. They all have blue headlamps, so I think for the Banuk, that blue light is like the guiding life force of these strangely animated metal animals. And so you get to really explore the Banuk culture. As you wander around the Frozen Wilds, you'll find Banuk villages. You'll talk to Banuk chieftains and see them talking to their people, ruling their people, explaining the philosophies of the Banuk, which is very kind of Nordic-like, I guess Viking-like. They're used to surviving in the wilderness. They're used to cold climates and high places. And they have a very kind of hardy, self-contained survivalist mentality that is mixed with this mysticism about the machines and the origins of the world. And as Aloy, at this point in the game, you have explored fully and discovered the secrets of why these machines are here. And so the Frozen Wilds is an interesting DLC in that way too. As Aloy, you know much more than the tribe does about the realities of this world. And so you get to see Aloy trying to kind of gingerly tread the line of trying to tell Banuk people the things that she has learned, whilst not just steamrollering their organic spiritual beliefs. And that's really interesting. I mean, the landscape of this game, of this DLC, is also different to Horizon Zero Dawn in that it's a deeply snowed-in high area of the map in a way that hasn't been seen elsewhere in the game. There's a bit of snow here and there in Horizon Zero Dawn, but in the Frozen Wilds, you'll often be wading through knee-deep snow and seeing Aloy's animations as she does so, and seeing the sun kind of catching the snowy mountains in the distance and glancing off the powdery drifts of snow that you're walking through. It's really special. So if you combine that with some excellent new music, and with the Banuk's sort of spiritualism, and then the snowy landscape of the Frozen Wilds, and you have possibly the best part of Horizon Zero Dawn. And I'm struck by the fact that when I reviewed Control's Foundation DLC, I also felt like that was maybe the most fun I'd had playing Control. And I feel the same way about the Frozen Wilds. And I think that there are a few reasons for this. I think that, for a start, it's like the developers have kind of had time to find their sea legs with the game. They've made the main game. They know what works and what doesn't. They know what aspects of the game are the most interesting, and they can bring them to the fore. And in Control, they realized that the map was overcomplicated, and so the DLCs had a much more manageable map and things like that. In Horizon Zero Dawn, it's just a perfectly balanced episode of the game, without the kind of the pressure of that wider narrative of all of the different subplots. It's a very concise delivery of everything that makes Horizon Zero Dawn great. So when you meet the Banuk chieftain, you'll find out that there are some hunters that have gone out and become lost and haven't reported back. So that's a side quest that you can get. You'll find out that there is a mysterious machine presence at some part of the Banuk's valley called the Cut that you have to go and investigate. You'll find out that there is a sibling rivalry between a chieftain and a spiritual advisor who have different ideas about how the Banuk should handle the threats that are coming in their direction. And you'll find out some more interesting leads about the different technologies that have been found in this area and the way that they connect to the main game. And so what you end up with is a wonderful chapter of Horizon Zero Dawn with a couple of new weapons, some new enemies to face, some quite intense sections that will test everything you've learned so far in the game. And when I came to this, I already knew how to control Aloy. I already had my battle strategies. My favourite weapons were all powered up to the maximum. And so when you come into a DLC like this, I feel like you come in very empowered and already having learned the ropes of the game, and with your character at a very high level. And that's what was so fun about the Foundation DLC. It was that Jessie was already like a kind of a superhero by the time I started playing that one. And Aloy is the same. You have all of her outfits, you have all of her different charms that you can use to customize your weapons. You have all your different ammunition, you have a deep stash of materials for making extra ammo. And so it's very empowering to play through a wonderful chapter of the game with your character at full strength. It's really enjoyable. And they also do a great job at just the gameplay. There is a huge section inside of a hydroelectric dam that introduces new puzzle elements alongside new story elements. There is a great section where you move through another kind of a vast technology-filled space. And then there is the landscape itself where the Banuk can be found dyeing their garments. And so in the middle of this snowy expanse of white, you'll find these colourful geothermal puddles with the most beautiful colours of bright red and turquoise and blue and green and yellow. And that's what the Banuk are using to make their flags and to make their different materials that they'll use and their different paints and pigments. There are new collectibles for you to find. There are lots of side quests. There's a new Hunter's Trials. If you're interested in the Hunter's Trials from Horizon Zero Dawn, there is a new Hunter's Lodge assault course for you to take on. And even the kind of the finale of the stories where they all kind of come together in the final area of the game, it adds a new perspective on the events of Horizon Zero Dawn. It sheds more light on the world that came before this tribal civilization. And for any fan of the game, I think this is really an essential thing to play. It's incredibly high quality. I loved every minute of this game. I loved every minute of Horizon Zero Dawn, and the Frozen Wild was really just the cherry on the cake. I couldn't recommend it more. That is the Frozen Wilds. So that was Going Under and the Frozen Wilds. I hope you enjoyed hearing about them. I thought I would wind up this 50th episode with a couple of questions from listeners. I put out a call on Discord and Twitter at Gaming in the Wilds, and I got 3 questions. The first one comes from Richard Eriksson at Sillyguelo on Twitter, and he says, how did you end up in Iceland in the first place, and how did you end up deciding to live there? Well, it's kind of a long story actually, but I'll try and make it short for the purposes of the show. I met some Icelanders at a music festival, at the All Tomorrow's Parties music festival on the south coast of England. It was the Slint edition, and we bonded and became friends and partied together, and it turned out that they live in downtown Reykjavik, and they invited me for Airwaves music festival. So I came over for Airwaves and had one of the best weeks of my life, I think. I met a lot of people here, made friends with a lot of people, met some musicians and bands. I was working in music at the time, and I ended up working with some of those bands, and more of my work was in Iceland. I felt constantly drawn back to the country. There's something about this landscape and this wonderful bubble of creative culture that exists in downtown Reykjavik, of artists and musicians and people all kind of living very close together in a kind of a village-like community. But it's actually a capital city, so it's got all of the amenities of a capital city, like restaurants and nightlife and things to do, but it's got the feeling of a village. And I was living in London at the time and feeling a little jaded by London and tired by London. And so eventually I realised that I was at my happiest when I was in Reykjavik, and so I decided to move here just to kind of pursue that happiness. And I have to say it was a great move. Despite the kind of the burnout and stuff that I suffered in recent years, I think I've had some of my happiest time here. It's a lovely place to live. Crime is low, the air is clean, and the water is clean. It feels like a very safe place to live with a very high quality of life. And so I really enjoy it here. I do get a little bit of cabin fever living here in Reykjavik. It's a small town, you know. And so COVID has hit me a little bit hard because I usually travel to big cities and other countries to freshen up and get some different perspectives on things and see some new sights and taste some new tastes. So I'm really looking forward to COVID being over. So as much as I love Iceland, I think if you live here, you really do need to get out and about. And the second question I have is from Lexint, who is at WeekendTweets1 on Twitter. And they say, which game has helped you the most in getting through the pandemic? That's a good question, actually. I think that one that springs to mind is probably Red Dead Redemption 2, because at the time when we were all feeling very, very, very stuck in the house, I started to really look for and crave outdoor experiences. And one thing that Red Dead Redemption 2 does very well is to give you the feeling of the wind in your hair and living in the wild and camping in the wild. Like when you come out of your bed tent every morning and see everyone around you kind of stretching and smoking and cooking breakfast. You really feel like you're on a camping trip in that game. It's a wonderful feeling of the outdoors. And as you ride around that world, you can ride up mountains, you can go into forests and explore ruined old buildings and go to the tavern and the saloon. And there's so much to do. And I think at times when I was feeling a little claustrophobic during lockdown, Red Dead Redemption 2 really freshened me up. And even though I'm not a huge fan of the game, Death Stranding was also the same. You know, I spent a good 10-12 hours hiking around that realistic wilderness. And so I think games like that really helped me out. And the final question I have comes from Hoppel, who is at Atioroas on Twitter. And Hoppel says, which game have you bought the most times or the most often? For Hoppel, it's Horizon Chase Turbo, which they own on 3 systems. And if Tetris games all counted as one, then it would be Tetris, which Hoppel owns on 4 systems. So I racked my brains for this question. There are many, many games that I've bought twice, such as Limbo and Inside, which I own on iOS and Switch. The Ocarina of Time, which I bought the first time around on N64, and now own on the 3DS. Witcher 3, Short Hike, Manifold Garden. oftentimes when a game comes out on Switch, if it's suited to the platform, I'll buy it on Switch so that I can have it on the go and have it while I'm traveling. But there are 2 games that I own 3 times. The first one is Control, and that's a little bit of a sad story. I bought a physical copy of the game, and when I came back to Iceland, and I thought I'd lost it during my travels somehow, so I bought it digitally, and then the week after I bought it digitally, not the week after, a couple of months after I bought it digitally, it came out as the Ultimate Edition on PS Plus, and so I got that as well. So I've kind of owned Control 3 times. I did actually find the physical edition after having bought it, so I own the physical version, the digital version, and now the Ultimate Edition digitally also. But the game that I've bought 3 times just straight up is Mario 64. And I owned it on the N64 the first time around, like 20 years ago now. And a year ago I bought the 3DS edition because I wanted to revisit it. And then of course it came out again as part of Mario All-Stars, Mario 3D All-Stars. So I bought Mario 3D All-Stars, so I've bought Mario 64 3 separate times, and I own it on 3 separate systems. So that was the winner for me. So thanks to everyone for those questions. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all the listeners. Thanks for everyone that's been listening throughout this journey to the 50th episode. I'll be back next week with a new episode. And if you would like to enter the contest to celebrate this 50th episode, then you can head over to my Twitter, which is @GamingInTheWild. If you'd like to engage with me on social media and see what I'm up to, what I'm playing, I'm @GamingInTheWild also on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitch, and on Facebook. I love to hear what people are playing. I love to hear what everyone thinks of the games that I've played on the podcasts, about my opinions about them. So if you've played Going Under or Horizon Zero Dawn or any of the games I've talked about today, I'd love to hear what you think of them, so come and hit me up on social media. That's it for this episode. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll be back next week. Bye bye for now.